Admittedly, the directorial filmography of Kevin Costner is a bit of a blind spot to me. I haven't seen Dances with Wolves or The Postman or Open Range, and actually Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1 is my first Kevin Costner directed film that I've ever seen. But I have certainly seen a lot of the movies he is in. I'm aware that he is a bona fide superstar, star, American icon at this point. And also, when it comes to Westerns in general, I am kind of a late bloomer when it comes to that. I'm still playing catch up. I really discovered my love of Westerns maybe 2 years ago, but there's a lot of films that are on my watch list that I haven't seen. And by now you should know that we're talking about Kevin Costner's new film, Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1. And this is a film that is not going to work for everyone, which is, in my opinion, putting it lightly. I'm going to echo something that the podcaster Chris Ryan said on the Big Picture podcast, which I recommend everyone listen to. I listen to it every single week. And he initially said it when he was talking about The Bike Riders, which came out a few weeks ago. He said, I didn't really know that I was into motorcycles until I saw them on screen and I realized, hell yeah, I'm locked in. I generally don't go around telling people, look, I love Westerns. It's not really a genre that I think about too much, but boy, when they come out and a new one comes out and I get to see it, I'm locked in from jump. Something about the aesthetic and the setting and just gunslingers. I don't know. Westerns to me, they have a place in my heart. I'm going to do all of these discussions, and I'm calling them discussions rather than reviews deliberately. I'm going to kind of handle all of these discussions in the fashion where I talk about the things that don't work well with me, and then I'm going to talk about the things that I really liked about the project. And this is one that has, if you want to call them cons, has quite a few cons, but I do think that the pros are going to make up for it. So I want you to stick around and hear what I have to say positively about this film. So right off the bat, I want to pose a question, which is kind of beating a dead horse at this point with discourse around this movie. Should this movie have been a TV show? I don't want to answer it just yet because I want to answer it later on. So stick around to hear what I have to say about that. One aspect that I'm on the fence about is some people are complaining that this film was shot digitally and not on film. I'm of two minds about this, and this kind of has to go into what I'm going to say later. Basically, the ambition of the film is so high, and you understand that this film was made with a certain budget in mind, and shooting it on film would have just added extra cost to the project, which would then in turn hinder it from being made at all. So as much as I think that the film suffers from a little bit of too much of a television-esque digital look, I do think that without that, the trade-off is that we don't get the film at all. And therefore, while I would have enjoyed it to be shot on film and to look like a classic Western shot on film, if I have to sacrifice the film look for having the film at all, I'm going to take having the film at all, if that makes sense. Now onto the story, the balancing act of this film, which is structured as many different narratives across a 3-hour time span, gets a little bit messy and muddled at times. And I guess I should talk about the various plot lines in this film because there are, to my count, about 5 different storylines, major storylines that we're following. And at no point did any of the major plot lines ever really feel like they were intersecting or that they were approaching the point of intersection. So the film starts with this plot of land that's being surveyed to hopefully be built into a town, which will soon be called Horizon. Right when you think everything is hunky-dory and there's a bunch of families living there and they're having a dance party in town or whatever, it gets raided by a tribe of Apache soldiers, I guess. And this sequence jumpstarts what I'll call the Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington plotline, which essentially sees Sienna Miller and her daughter needing to restart their life on an army base that's nearby the town that just got raided. And there's a bit of a budding romance between Sienna Miller and Sam Worthington. And next we have a completely separate storyline with Jenna Malone, Abby Lee, and Kevin Costner, which sort of acts as this Jenna Malone being on the run from this Western mafia crime family who are after her son. And Kevin Costner acts as this like man with no name character who shows up to town one day. Literally, he has no name for like 2.5 hours of the movie, and then it's said by someone else in the movie. But he acts as this protector who is now tasked himself with taking care of Jenna Malone's child, or seeing to the safety of Jenna Malone's child. And then we have another separate story, which is a good old-fashioned wagon train run by Luke Wilson, and all of the drama that ensues there, heavily involving this British couple who aren't pulling their weight in the wagon train and are also bathing in the drinking water. Next, we have the story involving a young boy whose family was killed during the Apache raid on the town Horizon, and he decides he's going to join up with this band of, I guess, bounty hunters of some sort who are going out looking for Apache tribesmen, men, women, and children, and are selling their scalps. And that young boy is played by this young actor named Etienne Kalichi, I think is how you pronounce his name. And I thought wonderfully. I'm going to talk about performances later on, but that was the storyline that I think actually, surprisingly, I was the most invested in. And then we actually have some brief scenes from the perspective of some of the Apache tribesmen, women, and children. And this part of the film I thought wasn't focused on as much as it should have been. I ended up having a lot of questions, or a lot of hope that we would see more of their perspective, and maybe there is more of their perspective in the future installments of this story. So if you're thinking, how the hell is all of this packed into one 3-hour film? That's kind of how it feels watching the film. You get the sense that any number of these stories could have acted as their own feature-length film, which by the end of the presumably 12-hour runtime across the 4 chapters that are planned for this thing, it will sort of appear as if all of these stories have their own feature-length story being told. But because of all of this, there's some tonal genre shifts going on along the way. I mentioned the budding romance between Sienna Miller and Sam Worthington, and then you've got this sort of crime mafia on the run story with Kevin Costner and Jenna Malone and Abby Lee. And you've got this coming-of-age story with that young boy whose name is Russell, played by Etienne Kalichi. And you've also got this sort of eerie wagon train story that's going on. Yeah, so because of all of these different shifts in genre, sometimes you can get a little bit of whiplash, but for the most part, I do think that they all blend together fairly well. And another thing that I hesitate to call a con, but it was something that was irking me a little bit as the film was going on, was that the score didn't always match what was happening on screen. Westerns are known for having these sort of grand, triumphant scores, and this one has that in spades at moments when I thought it didn't really necessarily deserve it. It also suffers from something that I feel a lot of films in this genre, or just epics in general, suffer from, which is that I felt like it didn't trust its audience enough to know what it was supposed to feel. It felt like the score was telegraphing how the audience should feel at any given moment. As much as I love Christopher Nolan, one of my biggest issues with his movies is that oftentimes there is too much score happening, and it almost never stops, and I wish it would quiet down every now and then. And this film kind of suffers from that too. It kind of just feels like this score is this constant drone going throughout the entire film, and the moments that I felt should be tense didn't feel tense enough, and I felt like the score was kind of holding back some of the tension. And last but not least, I want to talk about the ending, which was a huge swing and a bit of a miss for me personally. So, spoiler warning going forward. The film ends with about a 2-minute montage that seems like a trailer for chapter 2 of this story. And it kind of comes out of left field. There's no title screen that says, next time on Horizon and American Saga. It just jumps into a montage of what you'll see next time on Horizon and American Saga. And it really, really did not work for me. It really took me out. I almost could have appreciated it if it had the title screen, but I really didn't appreciate it because there are some pretty major spoilers. If you're paying attention to this fast cut montage, you'll see some spoilers. I was like, well, I would have loved to experience that firsthand. It isn't like there's a very clear transition into the end of chapter 1 and then this montage trailer for the next installments. It just kind of happens. Like I can't for the life of me think of what the last image of chapter 1 is before this montage happens. So it is like baked into the framework of this film, almost as if it was written to include this montage. And I really didn't like that. I kind of wish that there was some finality to chapter 1. I really wanted one image to end this
chapter on before I go ahead and see the next one. But instead you get this mishmash of other scenes from and characters who we've never met before, and scenes from a movie we haven't seen, and ultimately spoilers for a movie that we haven't seen. So yeah, the ending was kind of a swing and a miss for me. All right, now I want to talk about the things I really enjoyed about this film. And number one, I got to talk about the ambition of this film. It's a 3-hour chapter 1 of a 4-part saga. I personally am the type of person to see something like this and just immediately be inspired and amazed and really impressed with the dedication to something like this. And I know that not everyone is that way. This film really takes after the scope of a film like How the West Was Won, which is cited by Kevin Costner as a huge influence on this film. And you see a lot of How the West Was Won reflected in Kevin Costner's Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1. Just because of the scale that it's aiming for, I think it's worthy of some amount of praise that it succeeds at all. Even if some elements of the film fall flat, some fat could have been trimmed from Chapter 1 for sure. I forgot to mention that earlier. In spite of all of that, the fact that this film is going for such a large scope is commendable and something that I really need to make mention of, because I don't see a whole lot of people making mention of it. And another thing I want to mention that this film does really well is it captures the unpredictability and the fear and the messiness of the American frontier and of the Western genre. Like I said earlier, there are some characters who show up and then we never see him again. There's another character played by Michael Anganaro, who you might know from Red State or Sky High or from Almost Famous. And he shows up at one point as the husband of Jenna Malone's character after she's run off from this crime family. I was really enjoying his character. I always enjoy seeing him on screen. And he gets killed in a pretty unceremonious and brutal way. And once something like that happens in a film like this, you start to anticipate that this could happen to anyone on screen. It almost is like how I would describe the show The Boys, almost like the Homelander effect. Once you watch the first season of The Boys, you start to realize how unhinged the character of Homelander is. And so anytime someone is in his presence, I immediately feel that tension in my gut that this person is not safe here. And to a certain extent, Horizon acts in a similar fashion, because at many points in the film, I felt like characters were not safe where they were, or that they were going to die in some unceremonious way, and it was going to just sort of be brushed aside, because that's kind of what happens to the Michael Anganaro character. Even Jenna Malone's character doesn't even really react to his death, which I thought was an interesting choice, because death is just such a pervasive and unpredictable thing that happens in Western films and in the Western frontier. And briefly, I just want to mention that I think that the performances across the board are all doing a great job. I'm particularly fond of the young boy who plays Russell, the one who is seeking out Apache scalps as revenge for his family being killed. I think Kevin Costner does a perfectly serviceable job as this sort of not-so-talkative man with no name, walks into town character, a very classic character. I think Sienna Miller and Sam Worthington actually do have a fair amount of chemistry going on. I know some people are not too fond of that whole storyline, but I think that they're doing a great job, especially when Sienna Miller has to confront the idea that her husband and her son are killed. I think she does a fantastic job. Even Giovanni Ribisi, like, no one can look out a window better than that guy does in the last 10 seconds of the movie. And he's like ranked, he's like the 4th billed cast member in this film, and he is straight up shown for less than 30 seconds, and all he's doing is looking out a window. I imagine he's going to have a larger role in future installments, but I thought that was hilarious. I started cracking up when his film was named 4th in the credits. So, final thoughts. This is a hard film to talk about with any finality, considering that it isn't pretending to be anything other than Chapter 1 of a 4-part saga, or another way to think of it as the 3 hours of a 12-hour story, and we haven't heard the other 9 hours of this story yet. Therefore, judging this film harshly kind of goes against everything I was taught against books and their covers and when not to judge them. So I'll certainly be tuning into future installments of this film, future chapters of this film, but I feel like it might mostly be purely out of curiosity to see where this whole thing unfolds, rather than as a out of like a full-fledged diehard desire to see where this story goes. Now, it may seem like I'm being a little bit negative toward this film and, not just overall like rah, here we go, Western epic, send this to the best picture race. But I really have to commend this film again and admire it for its bravery and its ambition across the board. It's really rare to see such a huge gamble like this on screen. This film is heavily financed by Kevin Costner himself. This film does not really have a major studio behind it outside of distribution. And so for any of its flaws, I almost feel like I can look past them for the time being, at least until I get the full picture of everything. I feel like I can forgive its flaws because of the sheer ambition and dedication involved along the way. I mean, Kevin Costner made a genre film that is considered to be the hardest sell for modern Americans as well as international audiences. Westerns as well as American baseball movies, which Kevin Costner is also very familiar with, are the hardest to sell internationally. If you are at all interested in the financial behind-the-scenes elements of a movie like this, like how a movie like this actually makes money or gets financed and then makes money, I recommend everyone listen to the episode of The Town with Matt Bellany. He has a guest on that really explains everything in detail, and I think it was really eye-opening to hear. Along with Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, which is also coming out this year, this film, Horizon, is a 20-year-long passion project, and you can see the love and dedication on the screen, and if you're someone like me, that love and that dedication just gets transferred right into my heart and soul, and I just really admire it, even if I don't enjoy all of the aspects of it, even if I could see certain quote-unquote flaws. The fact that this film exists, like I said earlier, is a miracle at all, which is why I wasn't upset that it wasn't shot on film, because just to reiterate that point, it's shot digitally to save money so that it could exist at all. So the fact that it exists at all is something that, in my mind, is praiseworthy. When we only reward quote-unquote great films or major studio tentpole films when they come out, we can't really complain too much when they decide to stop putting films like this in theaters and start shoving them off onto television screens or onto streamers. And it really seems like a kind of, you have to vote with your wallet sort of thing, especially for a movie like this. If you want filmmakers taking risks and telling ambitious original stories, then I urge everyone to go see films like this when they are available to you in theaters if you have the means to. So back to that original question that I asked before, should this have been a TV show? Because it certainly feels like one. No, I don't think it should have been a TV show. I think that it is an incredibly ambitious work made by a dedicated filmmaker, and I think films like this should be rewarded and celebrated because, if anything, it's sending a message to studios, to theaters, to future budding filmmakers that you can make your wildest dreams come true. You can make the film that you want. You can make that passion project, and it can be exhibited to theaters and to audiences. And yeah, so I'm kind of going to leave it there. I don't think that this should have been a TV show. I think that we should redirect that conversation into what kind of films are we showing in theaters, and I legitimately do think this should be seen on a big screen. So those are my thoughts on Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1, and I want to kind of, since this is my first time doing a film discussion on the channel, I want to mention that I'm going to opt into, or technically out of, doing something that a lot of YouTube reviewers will do, which is that I don't want to implement any sort of rating system, whether it be star system or a number system. I don't want to do that. If you are curious what I would rate any of the films I'm going to talk about on this channel, you can follow me on Letterboxd. But the reason I'm not doing it here is because this is a channel that is dedicated to positivity, and I am particularly someone who some might consider overrates certain projects, or who just has an affinity for enjoying things that other people find less enjoyable. And when you have a rating system, let's say the 5-star rating system, if I rate something 3.5 stars, some people might look at that as it not being worth their time or as being a piece of trash or whatever. Whereas other people might say like, oh, that's pretty solid. That's maybe like a C plus or whatever. I might have a whole video about rating systems in the future, but rating systems to me, especially in YouTube videos, I think can just give a false narrative that I don't really want to push. I don't want to dwell on this point too much. I just want to sort of manage everyone's expectations going forward with this channel. If you're confused why there isn't some sort of number that that I'm sharing with you all that is going to indicate how I feel about Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, then I'm sorry, I'm not going to do a rating system unless convinced otherwise. So let me know if you think I should implement a rating system. And that'll do it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you thought of Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. Let me know if you're excited for Chapter 2, which comes out in like 5 weeks or so from the time I'm recording this. I will be seeing it, and I'll be letting you know my thoughts on, I guess, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 combined. Let me know what else you'd like to see on this channel. You can go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when new videos are released. I'm going to be talking about the Bike Riders pretty soon, and I'm very excited about that. I really love that movie. Spoiler alert. So hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all next time.